We are really fortunate to have Michelle and Abbey with us today. They delivered the MODS behavioural activation intervention as support workers, and we are keen to hear their views on how they found it. MODS was a large-scale trial of a guided self-help intervention for older adults with multiple long-term health conditions and low mood. The support workers received training in the use of the MODS intervention and delivered it with the aid of a booklet which had been designed and adapted with input from a variety of people, including those with experience of low mood and or physical health conditions, caregivers and members of our consensus group and patient and public involvement advisory group. The booklet looked at ways to help the participants keep doing the activities they found useful in their life. Where activities had to stop, for example due to being physically too difficult, the MODS support worker helped them to look at alternative activities which would help them keep the important things they got out of doing these activities in their life. As part of helping participants to access available support, MODS support workers would help the participant to find out about and access services from their GPs as well as other agencies and groups to help them maintain their well-being and carry on being able to do the things which were important to them. So, Abbey and Michelle, can you tell me about why you chose to take part in the MODS study?
So, there was a couple of reasons that I chose to take part in the study. So first of all, I've worked in research for a couple of years, predominantly in research delivery, but the studies I work on my role just happens to be very much more computer-based, I would say, or not patient-facing. So it was just lovely to have the opportunity to get to know the participants and build a therapeutic relationship with them. And I also have personal experience with family members who've experienced low mood. So it was quite a personal study for me in that way as well. I found it really interesting and really beneficial as well.
Oh, thanks, Abbey. It sounds like there's a few reasons why you decided that you wanted to take part. What about yourself, Michelle?
Yeah, so similar to Abbey, it was a good opportunity. Any opportunity within research to be patient-facing, I try and get involved with. But for me, at the time when MOD started, I was quite new to research. And before that, I was working with older people in memory clinics and things like that. So I'd had a lot of experience in the patient group itself. So it was a good transition into research and build my experience.
Okay. So as you say, you'd had some experience with older adults, and it was a good way to kind of get yourself into research and find out a bit more about it. Were there any personal benefits for you from taking part in the study, Michelle or Abbey? Whoever has any thoughts on that?
So for development was one of my personal benefits in the role as a researcher. And I got to continue working with the patient group that I was already working with, which was great. And it was, for me, a personal benefit was at the end when it worked, when I saw the changes that had happened. I really enjoyed seeing that.
Yeah. I think that's something that we got from a lot of the support workers, actually, that feeling that they made a difference and seeing that benefit that people gain from it. And what about yourself, Abbey? Any personal benefits for you?
Yeah, again, kind of reiterating what Michelle said, really, seeing the positive changes, I think just made me feel more positive in my role. It was nice to kind of be at the forefront and see those changes happening kind of week by week. It also gave me more confidence when liaising with older people who are experiencing low mood. My clinical experiences with adults with a diagnosis of a learning disability. So this was, again, quite a learning curve for me and quite valuable experience moving forward in future research studies as well.
Okay, yeah. If we think about the intervention itself, which did you feel were the most beneficial elements of the intervention for the participants that you were supporting?
I think for me, there was a couple of things. So breaking down the tasks and having the time to emphasise to the participant how big the small changes can actually be. So what an impact just making little adjustments to everyday life can actually make. That was really important for the ability of the participants we were talking to as well. And again, it was nice to see them make them small changes and then come back with a positive attitude and add a little bit more to that. And also the opportunity to signpost and explore different services with the participant and look at local walks, for example, or a local coffee group that they could go to, and just open the participants' eyes to things that they could be accessing and social opportunities that were out there for them as they started accessing them as well.
Okay, so a couple of things you mentioned there. One was kind of the breaking things down. Seemed to be something that worked, and as you say, for you, being able to find out about things or about groups that people might be able to access. Was that the same for you, Michelle, or were there other things that you found were useful as well?
So yeah, I thought that breaking it down bit by bit and working together through it was really good, rather than just handing it to them and leaving them to it and catching up. I thought that was really good. The examples that were through it as well. So being able to see what it would look like, sort of thing, for someone else, so they could sort of put it towards themselves. And then the visual aids that were there, so working through it together with the cycle and putting in their own elements, so it could be they sort of took ownership of it and it was about them rather than it just being about examples of other people doing it and what it would look like for other people. But yeah, a lot of what Abbey said as well.
Yeah. So as you say, the cycle and being able to explain that to them, but then being able to make their own BA cycle as well was useful. How did you find the actual experience of delivering the intervention?
Longer than I thought it would be. So the contact itself, we were anticipated for about 30-minute contacts, but it never was. I'll be honest. Like it expanded every time we met. The particular people that I spoke to were isolated a lot of the time. So the low moves were impacted on that. They were isolated because of their physical abilities and stuff like that. But so when I was engaging with them, they had a lot to say. They wanted to talk about what they'd done, and not often might have been the only engagement they got that week for some of the people I spoke to. So trying to cut that short felt really hard, really awkward at times. So yeah, they would talk a lot, and I felt that delivering it was hard sometimes because there might have been some pauses in there that if I was looking at them face to face, I was saying over the phone, if I was looking at them face to face, I'd know whether they were contemplating something or they were waiting for me to bring something in. So then pauses were hard to judge at times. That's how I felt.
Okay. So as you say, people were isolated. They wanted to talk to you, and so sometimes things ran over a little bit. What about yourself, Abbey? Your experience of delivering the intervention?
Yeah, so I would definitely agree with Michelle in terms of the time constraints. Even if you would kind of emphasise to the participant, we've got 30 minutes today, and we have quite a structured session. If the participant was quite lonely or was someone that didn't have a lot of family or friends, they would still want to chat, and you kind of didn't want to be rude, but would have to keep reminding them that it is a research study and we are kind of stuck to that time frame as well. So that could be a little bit challenging. And again, it would have been nice to put a face to the name, but I think that's more from an interventionist point of view than a participant point of view, because it's not something that I remember a participant ever bringing up. But it was something that I would usually, from previous experience, see a participant face to face and was probably just more used to that. So that was just a learning curve again for me, I think, really. And it was, on the other hand, beneficial delivering the intervention over the phone for a couple of different reasons as well. So it was nice to kind of have all the documentation in front of you, and you could be making notes and jotting things down as you were chatting to the participant. If you needed to check anything regarding risk, you could kind of do that straight away, or make another call if you needed to do so as well.
Okay, so it sounds like, as you say, delivering it over the phone, there was some kind of challenges to doing that, but there was also benefits to doing that. Can you think of any examples where the participants were motivated to change? Any particular things that they ended up doing that they weren't able to do before, or maybe stopped doing?
Yeah, so I had one participant who was lovely to work with, and at the beginning they presented as extremely low in mood, but they began to engage with the intervention. We referred them to a couple of different services, and again, them small changes they started to bring in. So they started to read books, which they hadn't done in a number of years. They started to complete jigsaws, cook new recipes, and they just started to generally talk about the future and what they were going to do, whereas they wouldn't necessarily do that at the beginning. So it was just them little things that made a big difference to their life, I think. And each week they would tell me, oh, I made shepherd's pie this week, or something that they hadn't necessarily kind of done in the beginning.
Yeah, and I think that's something you mentioned earlier on, wasn't it? It's those small little changes, and them doing different things that seem to have an impact. What about yourself, Michelle?
Yeah, I had a person that was really motivated to get involved, and she'd previously been really independent, and she felt really isolated. Her family lived quite far away. She would, until recently, like I'd say about a year or two before that, she was driving, but she couldn't travel far enough, and she couldn't drive long enough to go and visit her family anymore. And by the end of this, she used to make dresses, but she stopped doing that as well. By the end of our contact, she planned to go and visit. She had a date that she was going to go and visit, and she'd made her a dress in the time. She got the sewing machine out, and she finished a dress that it started a long time ago but hadn't been finished, and she was really excited about it. The only challenge that came from this was she started going out a lot more. She was trying to catch her in for appointments for me to do the end sessions was very difficult.
Yeah, and I think if there's one reason why, we don't mind quite so much if participants are not there, is because if they're getting out and doing more, which is what the intervention's about, isn't it? So that's really interesting to hear. And you've kind of touched on this, I think, but what about kind of people's level of physical functioning? Was that anything that you noticed that maybe had improved for people?
This lady, she was relying on someone coming into her home to support them, support with her personal care and stuff, because they felt there was a risk of falling and difficulty in that. And by the end, she didn't need to wait for anyone coming into her house. She felt confident in going and supporting herself, and it was just really good to see, like to hear about every week that she was attending church, and she was going places regularly, and she was visiting people rather than them visiting her, which was nice.
Yeah, that sounds like quite a big difference for her. Yeah. And Abbey, did you notice anything as regards your participants' level of physical functioning?
I think I was kind of involved at the point where we were maybe just starting to see changes towards the end. So the participants' diet and one of their physical health conditions are quite closely linked in terms of how it would affect them and the mobility. So again, kind of going back to the recipes, that was a big starting point, and we'd researched recipes that would be beneficial for mobility for the condition that the participant had. So it was towards the end of the intervention that they just started going on walks again, just kind of 10-minute walks to get some fresh air. But considering that they weren't getting out of the house at all at the beginning, that was the beginning for them of starting to hopefully join one of the walking groups, one of the social groups. So they were just trying to build that up themselves before they then took that leap and joined one of those groups, and they felt like they could physically do that.
Yeah.
So it all very much interlinked what they were doing. So we started to see that change kind of towards the end.
Right. Okay. So you were quite early on in that process of change, but there was definitely steps towards that. And what about people's changes in their mood? Did you notice changes in people's mood throughout the course of the intervention?
Yes, I think so. Again, just little things kind of as it went on, talking about the future, or just sounding a little bit more upbeat, kind of saying good morning, even asking me about my day and how I was feeling. And just again, those little things. And you could kind of just tell in the activities that we're talking about, or they'd be excited as the weeks went on to tell you, oh, I've done this, or you'd be really pleased I've done that. So definitely an improvement in mood as we went on. And I think it was just a relief for people as well to have someone to talk to and to kind of express these changes too that they were making as well.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds good. What about yourself, Michelle?
Yeah, so a lot of the similar things that Abby experienced, very positive in planning, very enthusiastic about telling me about what they've done, more positive about their achievements as well. Like they were very keen to tell me about what they've done and how well they've done, especially gardening. I remember them talking about the garden very enthusiastically. They love to spend time in it, and now they were able to not only spend time in it, but they felt that they could do some tasks in it,
right,
which was really good for them, and they felt that helped their mood.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, that sounds great. One thing that I particularly want to ask about was how flexible or adaptable did you think the intervention was? Were you able to tailor it to the different needs of your participants?
So I didn't feel that I did enough participants for this to be able to feel like I could feel confident in changing it as we were going. We did do a little bit with it for one of the participants, and we looked at stage 4 sooner than it was in the process.
Okay,
that makes sense, because
I
think that was accessing services and looking at things like that. And when we talked about the stages, and that was, they felt that was the most beneficial for them at that time. So we went to that early. I think it was straight after stage 1.
Okay,
that was the only flexibility I did. So
but you used it kind of not in the stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. You were able to move around. Abby, what about you?
Yeah, I really liked how flexible the intervention was, to be honest. And one of my participants kind of, once they'd read through the workbook, they kind of led the session, and I explained that we can, if it's more suitable, 1 week to do this and that. So they've kind of picked the week that they started the diary. They'd already picked that up independently through the week. They'd felt quite motivated. So then we focused on that week, even though that wasn't necessarily kind of the order, but that was where they felt they were ready to kind of begin with. So I just think, I do really like how flexible it was, and I think it was quite beneficial for that participant especially. There was one week where one participant said, I feel quite confident with that, I feel quite okay with that, and I think we only spent 10 minutes chatting about that, and then we moved on to another week and we spent longer discussing that, and they felt they needed more support to look through the behavioural activation cycle and to understand the meaning behind that. So
so as you say, you were able to kind of focus on the part that you needed to focus on, and maybe spend less time on what they felt quite confident with. You've both mentioned quite a few things that you feel seem to work really well for the participants, such as kind of breaking things down. Were there any elements of the intervention that didn't seem as useful for your participants, or that they didn't need to use?
For me, I don't think there were, to be honest. I had a couple of participants at the beginning mention, I think it was Raj and Sandra, the kind of the case studies.
Yeah.
And they were kind of like, oh, a bit unsure about that. But then as we got into even the second or third session and they were kind of reading the stories through, they were kind of like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And you could see it kind of fitting into place. So even though they anticipated that it wasn't, it then was helpful.
Right, yes, and I think that's something you mentioned before, wasn't it, as well, Michelle, about the kind of stories that were followed through the booklet. Was there any elements of the intervention that you found didn't seem quite so useful, or that the participants didn't need to go over, Michelle?
No, I wouldn't say anything stood out as not useful at all. Quite often the participant would go through it themselves, as like what Abby said, like they're motivated to work through it themselves, so they literally went through every single bit, and talked about and reflected on it, and like, yeah, I didn't think there was anything that came up that they went, no, that doesn't suit me, doesn't fit for me, or anything like that, or can we move to the next bit? No,
right,
happy to just go through everything.
Yeah, okay. Oh, that's great. And were there any factors that affected the engagement of the participants with the intervention or with yourself?
I think for me the only thing that I could really think of would be if a participant was on the waiting list for therapy or a different support group or something else, and then they kind of started the intervention and then had to make the decision whether they wanted to carry on with the mods intervention or go down the other avenue that they'd been on this waiting list for a couple of months or something like that. But again, that was something that we were aware of already. There was no surprises. We discussed that at the beginning, and we knew that they could potentially disengage at that point, which was a planned disengagement. It wasn't that they would just suddenly stop engaging. But apart from that, I don't think so, for me, to be honest.
Okay. Anything you'd like to add to that at all, Michelle?
Just a little bit what I've mentioned before was when it got closer to the end of the sessions, it was harder to get them to pinpoint a date, or they were busy, or they were out. And sometimes it was that people were visiting and they weren't expecting them to be there when I was calling. So that conflicted sometimes, but that was it. They'd be happy to rearrange. So even though something was getting in the way, they'd be happy to rearrange and try for another time. Okay,
that's good to know. And was there anything or any thoughts that you've got around how the intervention might be implemented? You know, if it were to be made available, any factors that you think would be worth bearing in mind as regards that?
I think just one thing from me would be at the beginning, I think in hindsight it would have been beneficial just to meet the participant or have a chat with them, even just 15 minutes kind of before we officially started the intervention, just as a bit of an introductory, hi, this is who I am, can you let me know a little bit about yourself, that kind of thing really.
But, okay, yeah. And Michelle, did you have any thoughts on that at all?
So on the other side of it, I would think it would be beneficial to have maybe a review, like maybe just a catch up 2 to 4 weeks later, just to make sure that they feel like they're in the right direction, or if there's anything cropped up that they thought, actually, I think I need that help now, or a number for something, particularly at that point, just to keep them going, really. Okay. But yeah, I can't think of anything else.
No. So you maybe think kind of maybe something at either end might be beneficial. Okay. Well, thanks for taking the time to talk to us today, Michelle and Abbey. I think it's been really useful to get your insights and your thoughts on how being involved in the mod study was for you. Thank you.